Merci, Connor. Bonjour tout le monde.
Thank you, Connor. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be among you. First, I would like to say that I'm in Ottawa, in the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin.
We are going to be talking about bargaining and about public services. For many of you, you probably already know, we started bargaining with the federal government last June, in June of 2021. And today we find ourselves in a very critical point in bargaining in respect to where we are with the Treasury Board negotiations. Basically, Treasury Board has been very slow at the table, to the point where they haven't even put an economic offer on the table thus far. And as I said, we've been doing this since last June, and we've yet to see an economic offer on the table. And I don't have to tell anyone on this panel tonight about the rising cost of living and inflation. And all you've got to do is go to your grocery store, go to a gas station, and it's not like, oh yeah, everything increased 3 months ago. Things are increasing on a daily and weekly basis. And for us to be able to make sure that we continue to basically keep pace with the inflation and with the rising cost of living, we have to make sure that our members get a fair wage increase that they so rightfully deserve. Because if we don't, we're just going to keep falling further and further and further behind. So that is extremely important, that we make sure that we get a fair wage increase for our members. There's a couple of other issues, of course, that are very important to us as well during this round of bargaining. Remote work, for example. We all know that the nature of work is changing, and we want to make sure that our members, number one, have a right to be able to work remotely where they can, and as well, and just as importantly, have the right to basically, on hook, so that they're not tethered to their phone, to their computer 24 hours a day. And Treasury Board is very reluctant to talk about this, and we're not sure why. Another major issue for us, of course, is fighting racism in the public service and across all workplaces. One of the demands that we've had at our Treasury Board tables, for example, is to provide mandatory training on anti-racism. Treasury Board's response to that was, no, we're not going to agree to that, because we already do that. We already have resources for that. Well, the resources that they're talking about is an EAP program and some department or agency champion doing this off the corner of their desk. And if the training is not mandatory, how many employees do you think are actually going to participate? And yet when we put that demand in front of Treasury Board to say we want mandatory anti-racism training in the workplace, they simply said no. They said no. So I know nobody likes to hear this. The Canada Revenue Agency started their round of bargaining in January. Our border service officers, or FBs, are having a bargaining conference next week. Their bargaining is going to start very, very soon. We're going to be in a place where we're going to have close to our 160,000 federal public sector workers in bargaining. And as I was saying, I know nobody on this call wants to go on strike. But my friends, unless we see some major improvements from Treasury Board at the bargaining table, that's where we're going to end up, unfortunately. And as I said, I know nobody wants to go on strike, but we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we get a fair collective agreement for our members. And if, as I said, if that means going on strike, then that's exactly what we're going to do. And we've got a long way to go from what we've heard from Treasury Board. And that's why I said earlier, we are now at a critical point in bargaining with Treasury Board, because all we've been hearing is no's at the table and excuses as to why they don't want to do things, why they don't want to improve our working conditions, why they don't want to give us a fair wage increase. We're not asking for the moon and the stars here. Our opening economic offer that we put on the table was 4.5% per year for each of the 3 years. And we believe that we're going to have to get pretty damn close to that in order to keep up with the rising cost of inflation and the cost of living. And yet, Treasury boards, well, yeah, but the inflation that you're talking about is just a snapshot in time. Don't worry about it. Inflation is going to get better later this year, and it's going to get even better during 2023. I don't believe him. I don't know if you do, but I certainly don't. There's no indication at all that the cost of living is going to go down and the rate of inflation is going to start decreasing. There is nothing that to indicate that at all. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining the call tonight, and please join the Young Workers panel as well that Connor has put in the chat. And thank you again for joining tonight. And with that, our moderator for this evening is our very own Sister Colleen Coffey, the PSAC Atlantic Regional Executive Vice President. And Colleen, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. And thank you for that introduction. Now I don't have to do it. So listen, folks, I got to tell you, we got a great panel. We got some discussions to do here tonight. And I'm going to go right into some of the things that Chris Aylward said. You know, none of us want to go on strike. This panel tonight is going to talk to you about mobilization. And at the very end tonight, before we finish, we're going to talk about an action that you can do tonight, and it begins that mobilization process. And I can tell you firsthand what I know is mobilization works, and I'll tell you why. But so tonight we're going to be talking about public services, and important that we're talking to protect them. You know, PSAC, we've been fighting to protect workers from layoffs and contracting out for decades. It goes on and on, regardless of what government's in power, they always want to contract out our work. So right now, our bargaining teams are putting forward a new contract language, calling on Treasury Board to use the existing employees or hire and train new employees before they contract out jobs. We want them to share information and consult with PSAC prior to using contractors, and review the use of temporary staffing agencies. It's a terrible system this government has in place, and it's our job to force them to stop doing that through our collective bargaining process. But you know, again, I want to go back to what Chris said about mobilizing. I know firsthand that mobilizing works. And I'll give you a very quick example of mobilizing action that happened recently in Nova Scotia. Now, it was a couple of years ago, 2019, but I want to very quickly talk about 7 women cleaners in Greenwood, Nova Scotia. And the Department of National Defense decided to contract out cleaner jobs all across this country. And some said, I wanted to fight it. I want to fight this because one job lost to a contractor is one too many. Some said, oh, it's only one, it's only two. 2 leads to 10, which leads to 200. And so we put in a process in Nova Scotia to fight the Department of National Defense. And I knew it was big. But mobilization starts small. We had a rally. We did postcards. We did things in the newspaper. We even went to this little tiny mall in Greenwood, Nova Scotia, population 12,000 people. And we put a table in the mall and we were carrying people over and saying, did you know your employer's doing this? Did you know? And we got the community on board, and the community signed postcards. But you know, then one day we decided to put this paper on the front page of the Ottawa Citizen, and it pissed DND off royally. So much so that all of our mobilization paid off. And DND said right then and there that day, that's it, we're stopping that contracting. And not only did we save those 7 jobs in Greenwood, Nova Scotia, but the fallout was that we saved hundreds of jobs in Kingston, Ontario, plus any other contracting out. D&D put a policy in place because of our mobilization that they were not going to contract out any jobs in D&D, that they had to go through the union and everything first. So you know what? Mobilization pays off. And the reason we're doing tonight is because this is mobilization, and we want to get you started. We want to get you geared up. We want you to understand that when PSAC calls on you to mobilize, whether it's a letter writing campaign, whether it's putting something behind your chair, whether it's wearing a pin that says, I support my bargaining team, that's all mobilization. But over the past 2 years in particular, PSAC members, we never stopped delivering frontline services. We never packed up and said, okay, we're going home. And our members, from various Treasury Board agencies and workers, they stayed at work. They got those checks out. They got those payments out to Canadians when Canadians needed them most. And you know what? This government, they owe our workers for that. Our workers stayed on the job. Our members did that. Our workers got Canada through this pandemic. And you know what? It's through strong public services that made this happen. Public servants, not contractors. So our message to Treasury Board through collective bargaining and through what you're going to do tonight and for many days after in mobilizing is public services are important. These jobs need to stay public. We need more jobs to be public. And we have to make a commitment that we are, as members of PSAC, we are prepared to support our bargaining team and to fight contracting out. And so this panel tonight is all about that. And we have 5 fantastic panelists who are going to talk to you on various topics today, but all around mobilization and public services. So our first panelist tonight is Tufik El-Daher. He is currently the National Executive Vice President of the Union of Veterans Affairs Employees. Tufik was the Director of Equity Groups for the PSAC Quebec region, 2011 to January 2019. Tufik served on the PSAC National Human Rights Committee for the Pride Group during the same period. He has served as co-chair of the Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, and Transgender Committee of the FTP, GLBTQ, FTQ, for a period of over 7 years. Our second panelist is Bertrand Shepard, and he is a researcher at the Iris Foundation in Quebec. Bertrand specializes in research about public finance, as well as in Quebec's energy and environmental challenges. Iris has partnered with PSAC on research projects in the past, in particular around public services and the economy. Our third panelist is Rose Smith-Gimblett. Rose is a member of the PA bargaining team and a part of the Common Issues team. Rose has been an active union member since 2004. Woohoo to Rose. Oh, that was my timer telling me to stop. Go away, thank you, go away. Go away. And then we have, who is next? Panelist number 4 is Marie Lourdes Garnier. Marie is a member and on the board of ACORN Canada, a low-income people's union. She is a fierce campaigner and has led many of ACORN's campaigns since 2012 on issues such as minimum wage increases, childcare, and community benefits agreements. And our final panelist is Morgan Gay. Morgan is a PSAC negotiator, and he will review the demands and Treasury Board response or non-response, as Chris Aylward alludes to, which is very true. So then after we have the panelists, then what I'll do is we have some questions that some people put forward in advance for the panelists. And then at the very end, we are going to do a mobilization event or action. And you'll find that it is so simple to do. It really is. So I'm going to go backwards and I'm going to go to Tufik. So Tufik, over to you, please.
Merci beaucoup. C'est très gentil.
Thank you very much. It's very nice of you. Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to be here tonight with you. I'm speaking to you from Quebec, from the beautiful city of Quebec, the unceded Huron-Wendat territories. Today, I'm here to talk to you about the perverse effect of privatization of our services. You know, I work for UVE since 2003. My first position was an analyst of the treatment center in Montreal. We had to manage the health program and to give authorizations to the veterans. And in total, we had 14 healthcare programs. And we have an additional program, the program for the autonomy of veterans, which is help in their home managed by the officers of the Veterans Affairs. and I'll talk about it. So we know we have under Harper, he decided to privatize the services, and unfortunately, he decided to privatize the healthcare program of Veteran Affairs, and then the problem started with the veterans and their families. You know, as an employee of the government, we know the mission of every departments at Veterans Affairs. We need a recognition for the veterans, of our veterans and their families. Allow me this. Let me read you part of the mission. It's very short. The mission of Veterans Affairs is to offer services and advantages for the client and adapted to the needs of the veterans, their other clients and their families, to recognize the services of these veterans and to keep it in the memory of all Canadians and to remember what they accomplished. That is the mission. What happened is that with this privatization of the healthcare programs that went to the Blue Cross, it had a very negative impact on the veterans and their families. Before that change, if a veteran had a question about eligibility about healthcare, let's see, psychological care, physiotherapy, massage therapy, vision care, whatever, prosthesis or dental care, we could answer the questions, we could facilitate the process with this person because we have compassion in our department. We help people. So let's say a veteran sent us a request and there was a prescription. All we had to do is call him and say, Mr. So-and-so, you have one prescription. Please call your doctor and ask your doctor to fax it to us. And that was it. But I can say that since the transfer to the Blue Cross and insurance companies, the communication is very cold and there's no more humanity with the communication because we know that the objective of an insurance company is to spend less and to be, to make money on the backs of our veterans. So the clients, what is too bad is that they receive refusal letters and they cannot challenge them and they believe that it's Veterans Affairs that refuse it, but it's Veteran Affairs that gave that program to a privatized organization. So Blue Cross takes rigid decisions in the name of Veteran Affairs. So now we look like the ones who refuse, but it is the Blue Cross that refuses them. So often we have to pick up pieces because of the Blue Cross. We help employees to go against those decisions. And that's what happened. Let's not forget that we cut employments to public servants who were taking care of pharmaceutical authorizations. Hundreds of one were cut and offices were closed to save money. Then they reopened the offices. So it was done on the backs of the veterans, but the problems with the privatization of the healthcare services of Blue Cross is that program costs hundreds and millions of dollars every year when the work used to be done by the public servants, and it was much cheaper when it was done by us rather than the Blue Cross. So we fought for a long time to keep it. I just have a small part to explain to you. The program for the autonomy of veterans with respect to help at home, to help them, with, taking care of their home. Before us, we used to talk to our clients a minimum of 1 or 2 times a year to assess the situation. The department gave this to the Blue Cross. The Blue Cross talks to our members or the veterans once every 3 years to check their needs. Some of them have needs and they cannot call because they don't even know they have access to those services. We were proactive as employees. We told the employer, please It's not a good decision. It goes against our mission to recognize our veterans. They didn't want to hear us. So this is what privatization did. It does not help. Public service helps the population much better, and we take much better care of our veterans and their families. Our objective is not to make people wealthier, but is to recognize the sacrifices of our veterans to allow us to live in a peaceful country. I say it with pride, and they didn't accept this. And thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Tufik. That was wonderful. I'd now like to invite Bertrand.
Bonjour.
Thank you, Bertrand.
Donc, bonjour à tous.
Hello,
Merci pour
everybody, and thank you for the invitation. I did a little PowerPoint presentation that's available in French and in English that will answer the mandate that I was given. It was to look at if I'd like to talk about myth about the public sector. It's just to see, is it true that the public service is expensive systematically, and that, for example, that the jobs don't have any economic advantages? There are several myths, but what is important and what is interesting to remember is that more often than the expenditures stabilize the economy in the public sectors in some regions, but also during crisis period. So we will look at the next slides. So first slide, we're hearing often here, we're seeing the current expenditures, and they say it's always high, and that the public service is expensive. Oh, public servants are expensive. When you look at the information, what I like is that the percentage of expenses and investments compared to the GDP between 1981 and 2021. Before 1980, it was less expensive. In percentage of the GDP in 2021, in the crisis, the government expenses are 25%, so less than in the 1980s. Furthermore, if we look how it increased, the investment expenses are in orange. The blue expenses are the income of the employees partly. They actually went down compared to 1980, especially, and they really went down in the 1990s. With respect to employment, if we take the next slide, if we notice this, it is the same thing. We will come back to it. We were told that there are too many public servants in the public sector. They take too much space. This is the proportion of the public sector employment compared to other jobs in Canada. In the 1970s, it was 23% of the jobs that were in the public sector. In 2018, before the crisis, we were at 20%, between 20 and 21. And there was an increase in 2021. We will see why in the next slide. But it is in the healthcare system, in education, because of the crisis. So let's go to the next slide. The next slide shows us the number of jobs in the three principal subsectors of the public sector. We see the blue line, which is teaching, education. There's an increase. So it's per 100,000 inhabitants in Canada between 87 and 21. You see the big increase in 2021. But we notice that the teaching and health had the biggest number of increase in jobs. Many people say there's too many public servants, but at the end of the 1990s, it was quite stable in health and education. And you will see it here in the next slide. we are more centered on jobs in the public sector, and we notice here that the jobs, the number of employees for every level of government, it's by 100,000 inhabitants. There's an increase in the municipal sectors. In the provincial sector, it went down, but in the federal sector, it's quite stable between 1990 and 2020. So when there's a myth saying that there's too many civil servants, oh, they're too expensive. Well, you know, what it shows us in general is that it's quite stable.
And particularly in the federal public service. So the role of the public service, other than obviously serving people and the needs of the population, makes it possible to help some regions and some areas, and often participating in improving the quality of life of all of the population. There are examples later, we'll see it in the next slide, as to how we're able to improve wages of people, women notably, and people from different areas. We can see the ratio of average wages for women. If you compare the ratio to that of men, and you look in the public sector, from 1998, we were at about 87%. In 2018, we were at around 90%. So the wages of women in generally at 90%, was generally at 90% of that of women. In the public sector, it's much lower. It's about 80%. So that exists in part because the public sector was able to draw towards draw upwards and a struggle for wage equity, for example, and that made it possible to improve the situation in general. If you look on the next slide at the importance, at the population of women in the public sector, you can see the percentage of women employed in between the public and private sectors in Canada, and you can see that in the public sector, a lot more women are hired. Close to 63% in the public sector of employees are women, whereas it's at around 45% in the private sector. So what you can see here is that in general, the percentage of women in the public sector is higher, and also they are able to participate in a sort of economic resilience that is ensuring that jobs for males, and what makes it possible to stabilize employment in certain regions where there's not only male-oriented jobs and jobs in the employees in the public sector participate in the economy. If we look at the next slide, what you realize is that what I took here was the effects for each $1 million spent, what the effect of that is. You can see the slide in more completely, I think in the chat there's a link to it, but in general, for every $1 million spent, how that $1 million is multiplied in the economy. If you look at grains and livestock raising, for every $1 million, it brings back $1.1 million GDP, and government services are among the highest, and in the public sector notably, because this money that is spent in wages and benefits is spent in Canada. It's spent in consumer goods, and there are few people who are tax evaders in the public service, but that money is spent in daily life of your average person, and not for products produced outside of Canada. So giving money in wages to Canadians is particularly in the public sector, makes it possible to improve our GDP. If you look at the next slide, it's directly related to jobs. Every $1 million invested in the public sector creates many more jobs per $1 million invested as compared to all the other sectors for the same reason. Wages that are paid make it possible to support the economy in general, and they are spent on the sector and in Canada in general. So in general, when you say, oh, giving money to the public service is just a waste of money, that's completely absurd on the one hand. And obviously, it doesn't count the services that are provided, which would undoubtedly be more expensive in the private sector and not as good. And it doesn't count the extent to which the money that the government spends in the public sector comes back in the economy through taxes and expenditures, and it makes it possible to support the economy that is more diversified as compared to the private sector. So in a way, what I want to say is, don't listen to those who say, the public service employment is just a waste of money. It's a problem. No, it's an economic stimulus. I would like to thank you for listening. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Bertrand. It is interesting to hear and to see it, right? I mean, even I think as public servants, sometimes our own public servants think that we cost too much. And in fact, it's the furthest thing from the truth. So thank you very much for your presentation. Rose Smith-Gimblett, you are up next.
Oh, geez, that looks scary on there. Hi, everybody. My name is Rose Smith-Gimblett. I'm a member of the PA and BART and Commons Issues team member. I am also from speaking to you from the uncentral land of Nova Scotia, of the land of the Muggy. And Colleen had alluded to it before, but in Greenwood, there was a campaign called This Could Be You. Now, the reason it was said this could be you, because it could have been anybody. The Greenwood base was going to shut down 7 cleaners. So first I'm going to give you my little ramble about, how the government always contracts out public service because I feel it's more cheaper than hiring real people. So, and the other thing is, once the contract goes out the door, we as Canadians don't know what's being spent. We don't know where our public funds money are going to these companies and what we're paying for. And the only people that know, because it's private and stuff, we can't find all this information, but it's profit mongers. And as far as they're concerned, public service people are a number. You are a number to get rid of. So, and some of the contractors that come in are not the greatest. They use our supplies, they water down their cleaning material, they charge you an outlandish amount for toilet paper, and they don't give you any of it. So, this is what contracting can hurt, how it can harm us. So this is an abuse of public funds and by the contractors, and it's abuse that includes constant demands and amends on these contracts. So when they put these contracts in, of course, they could change them and amend them. Well, we thought it's going to cost this much, but it actually costs it, which actually does cost more than hiring a public service person to do the job. So Canadian force bases budgets are skewed to ensure that they're more favorable to contracting out than they are to hiring a public service person. And we found this out when we did the This Could Be You campaign, because the base commander pretty much said, I have no suit, no money to hire these 7 cleaners, but I have tons of money to hire a contract cleaner. And our argument was, can you take some of that money and put it into things? No, they could not do that. So in the meantime, I and 7 of those other 7 cleaners put in a grievance, believe it or not. They were 7-term people that stood up and put a grievance in the fact that they were being let go, that they were unfairly being let go and a contractor was coming. And then we started the whole campaign with PSAC and UNDE about what was going to happen and what did we need to do and how did we need to mobilize the whole community and the workers at 14 Greenwoods and elsewhere. We had also found out the same thing was happening in Kingston, Ontario. So being good unionists, we got together, Ontario and Nova Scotia, we had a conversation. What are we going to do? We need to stop this from happening. We need to stop contractor cleaners coming in. We need to stop contractors, period, for coming in and taking our jobs. Because when they take our jobs, we are harming the community more than we are. We're a loss to the community and the quality of life and everything when we lose our jobs and we get paid less. So when we grieved the base commander, we said pretty much, was there other options? Were there other jobs for these that we could put them in and keep these people fully employed? And they said no. So this is what I loved about our mobilization we did. The mobilization started everybody thinking, because when we said, this could be you, this could be your job gone next week. How are you going to feed your families? How are you going to pay your rent? Are you going to go work for the new contractor now for minimum wage? No benefits, no nothing. What do we need to do? And that's when we started the radio ads, the postcards. I even had one of my girls write a letter to the Prime Minister, who was flabbergasted, and gave it to the letter to the Defense Minister, who then got mad and called our base commander and said, what the hell are your people doing down there? Why am I getting a letter from some girl telling me that she is going to be homeless and will not be able to feed her children because she's losing her job? I can tell you our base commander was like, he called up, you guys can't be doing this. And we said, sir, we can and we will. And we will continue on till we get an answer to this is solved. And these 7 cleaners have permanent jobs. And you can't let them go because some of them are just about to be rolled over. Like they had done almost their 3 years, were about to be rolled over and then told, no, too bad, too sad. Don't let the door hit you when you go out the door. So in all, and I'm close to my time and I know I rambled. I'm sorry. I get all excited about this because this was a huge win for us. This was something that showed that we can fight this. And if everybody got together, we could fight this and we could win. And these 7 cleaners now have indeterminate positions. And they're happy. And the community's happy because that's 7 people that are having full-time jobs and we don't have to worry about them. And I think my 6 minutes is up. So I made sure I timed myself. So thank you. But remember, we can do it. We can fight this. But we need everybody there to fight with us. Because one voice is tiny. 90,000 voices and your families is a roar. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie. And I heard your beep go off too, just like mine. If I didn't put a timer on, I'd probably never be quiet. I think I was told that a lot growing up. So our next speaker, our next panelist, I'm happy to introduce Marie-Lourdes Garnier. The floor is yours. Your mute is on, I believe. Happens to the best of us, Marie.
Thank you. Merci, Colleen. Je m'appelle.
Thank you, Colleen. My name is Marie-Lourdes Garnier, and I'm from. I'm here as a representative of Acorn, Ottawa, because I'm a member of the National and Municipal Council of Acorn. For those who don't know, Acorn is a community organization of low-income people and from the worker class fighting for social justice regarding municipal problems, provincial and national ones. To remain independent, our members provide monthly dues to support us. That way, we owe nothing to governments or to businesses, but only to our members. Acorn Ottawa-Gatineau has 32,000 members, and Acorn Canada has over 160,000 members. With those numbers, we've been working since 2004 on campaigns like increasing minimum wage, protecting tenant rights, a fair banking sector, and much more. Personally, I've been a member of ACORN for close to 10 years, and I was introduced through our our program to prepare tax returns, where I received help free, and I saw a number of articles in newspaper articles on walls with demonstrations, campaigns, and victories carried out by the organization. I understood very quickly that I could be part of the creation of power for people, like I did in my original country, Haiti, if I joined ACORN. I spoke to the person responsible immediately, and I joined ACORN. And I'm now proud to be a member of the largest association of low-income people in Canada. As members of ACORN, we share, that is, numerous priorities with members of PSAC. That's why we've been honored to be invited to speak to this evening on this panel about protecting public services. ACORN members count on the services provided by PSAC members to have access to essential services. Among the most important, let's say, pensions, federal assurance, employment insurance, COVID payments, taxes, and establishing links between families and other people at Service Canada. It's absolutely essential for households with low income and the community overall to have those services remaining under public control. Often, those financial benefits are the only source of income for our members. And we all know that when services are managed by the government, when they're contracted out to private companies with the goal of profit, services becomes unreliable, and the costs come back upon the clients, on citizens, I mean. There's a lot at stake for our members. If essential services provided free by the government are contracted out to a private company whose absolute priority is making money. One of my best memories of using a federal public service was when I had to apply for my retirement, my pension. I visited the Service Canada office on Ogilvie to obtain assistance, and employees made sure that I understood the forms properly and my options. There was a very strong possibility of costly errors for me, but the worker described exactly what I had to do to take full advantage of the program. As an immigrant from Haiti, and I have backgrounds in complicated work that required a very close attention to be correctly included in the paperwork, but happily the agent was patient with me and paid very close attention to my case. They really reduced my stress in applying and gave me confidence in the process. If that service was privatized, with the workers who are paid and trained by some big company, I fear that they wouldn't provide the same level of service, and it would suddenly become too costly to gain access to it. Private companies only want to make money. Their priorities are not the same as those of governments, which whose priority is supposed to be the well-being of the public, and they work to help people take advantage of services that are provided. Private enterprises are only looking to make profit. That's why, over the years, Acorn has worked with unions to stop the privatization of public services. For example, Acorn concluded contracts with unions to stop governments from contracting out services such as garbage removal and other services. Within that partnership, Acorn hired and trained a team of lawyers to go door to door, solicitors, that is, to go door to door in key ridings in order to gather signatures on a petition and generate phone calls to politicians. It's through this partnership between the community and workers that we were able to win and protect our public services. We want to work in solidarity with unions, and we're ready to, particularly, to work with PSAC to fight against privatization of public services. It's the responsibility of the government to care for its citizens. And going to the privatization of public services is wanting to transfer that responsibility to private organizations. We are asking for solidarity between all the organizations that care about social and economic justice to struggle against that possibility. And I know that Acorn will join forces with PSAC in those efforts to be heard. Thank you for listening to me this evening. I'm looking forward to hearing your comments on the way in which we can fight together for justice. Justice for everyone. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Marie. You are a wonderful speaker. Thank you. I'm sold. You sold me. So our next panelist is Morgan Gay.
Wow, talk about a tough act to follow, eh?
That's what I was thinking, Morgan. I'm so glad I went first.
Marie-Lourdes, solidarité et concert. Bien dit. So everybody, hi. My name is Morgan Gay, like Colleen said, and I am a negotiator with the union, PSAC. And I am the union's negotiator for workers at the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, for people who work at Border Services, which is FB, the Treasury Board table that I have. Chris mentioned them earlier on today, and Chris Elbert, when he made his initial presentation. I also have all of the national museums across Canada, and I'm also the union's negotiator for our members who work on Parliament Hill, and a couple of the Crown corporations too. So all of my units are federal. I only negotiate right now in the federal public sector. So I've been asked to say a few words about the union's position with respect to contracting out and bargaining, and what's the situation of bargaining around contracting out. And, you know, several people have mentioned it already today or this evening. Contracting out is a serious threat to our jobs. Privatization can mean job loss. But one of the things that nobody's mentioned so far, but is really important, is that contracting out also impacts our ability, our bargaining power. When they contract out our jobs and they whittle away the work that we do for the government, for the employer, It makes it much harder for us in the future to be able to disrupt the employer's operations when it's time to disrupt their operations and win a good contract. So contracting out impacts not only job security, but also impacts our ability to bargain and exercise power with the employer. A couple people have already mentioned this, so I won't dwell on it too long. But the current government are fans of contracting out. We all know that Harper and the Conservatives were hell-bent on contracting out work. Well, these folks aren't much better. I don't know if people have heard about this, but just recently they announced a private sector, a P3 scheme for the new rapid rail transit from Quebec City to Windsor, where a lot of that is going to be done by private sector if it goes through. In fact, it will mean a significant chunk of Via Rail could see itself privatized as a result of what's been announced by the government as of late. Which Unifor, I know, and other unions are gearing up to fight, as well they should, and we're going to have to act in solidarity with those folks. You know, a couple of people have mentioned this, but there have been some very significant fight back campaigns against privatization. We've heard a lot about the DND battles that Colleen and Rosie and others have been involved with, and those aren't over. There's still stuff that goes on around supply chain, all kinds of stuff that they are looking at contracting out or want to contract out in national defense. And Tufik, of course, talked about Veterans Affairs. At the Canada Revenue Agency, which is the boss I deal with, we were successful in fighting off attempts. They actually contracted out some work when CERB first came in. The union pushed back and was successful in getting the Canada Revenue Agency to bring those workers, bring that work back into the bargaining unit. We would not have to engage in these fights. I'm going to state the obvious here. We would not have to engage in these fights, folks, if we had language in the contract that dealt with this stuff, right? I mean, we probably still would have to struggle with the government because they're not to be trusted as an employer, but it would make it a lot easier for us to fight back if we had clear language in the collective agreement that dealt with the issue of contracting out of our work, and we don't have that with the Treasury Board or with the separate agencies, okay? But we're trying to get that now in this round of bargaining. So in this round of negotiations, there are a number of different proposals on the table, depending on who your employer is, because there's some differences between what's happening at Treasury Board and what's happening at the CRA. And I believe there may be some differences with CFIA and some of the other federal separate employers. But, you know, here's the thing to keep in mind. All of our proposals are geared towards making it difficult, if not impossible, to contract out our work. Okay, and it involves consultation with the union, protection of our jobs, scaling back of term agencies, and you know, for anybody who works, for example, in the, I mean, I can speak personally about the Ottawa area, CRA. They bring in term employees or contract agencies all the time to backfill positions when they come up, and so that's an issue that we want to challenge to protect our work, because if we ever do a job action, we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where there's an army of contract workers coming in and doing our work, people who work for contract agencies, okay? If you want to know what we're proposing, it's very simple. You go to the website. Go to PSAC.com, you click on your bargaining unit, you click on bargaining demands, it's all there. If you work for the Treasury Board, it's under common issues. If you work for the CRA, it's there at the CRA, it's on the CRA, etc. You can find it all there on the website. Now, Rosie said some stuff that I thought, well, everybody has said some really interesting things here this evening, but I really was interested to hear Rosie's thing about this could be you, because, you know, this is a priority for the union for the reasons that we've been talking about this evening. But, you know, I expect we probably have members out there, maybe some of your coworkers who are like, well, what is it? This doesn't have anything to do with me. You know, they're not going to contract out my job. You know, all I want is for the union to bargain me a raise. That's what's important. And I want some more leave. I don't want to hear about this other stuff because it's got nothing to do with me, right? But it does. If you work for the government, you're a member of the union, it does have everything to do with you, because it determines whether or not you're going to have a job, right? There's no raise to be had if you don't have a job, okay? And so I think we would all agree that there are a few things that are more important than whether or not people are working. And the other thing, of course, like I mentioned earlier, is there's a direct correlation between how much of a wage increase we can bargain for folks and how much leave we can bargain for folks. and how many people are in our bargaining unit. So if we withdraw our labor, we can punish the government like we need to get a fair contract. There's a direct correlation between the two. In bargaining, this might shock some folks, brace for impact, but the employer hasn't moved one iota in bargaining. They've said no, 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 and no on these issues, okay? And in my opinion, they're not gonna move unless we pressure them. They're gonna keep telling us no. You know, I say this to my bargaining units all the time when I'm meeting with members. We could have the most eloquent arguments in the world. We could have the best facts and figures in the world. They're still not going to move unless we find ways to put pressure on them, which is what we're going to talk about this evening. Presumably, that's what we're here to do. I can tell you that as negotiator with other federal employers, other than the Treasury Board, that this is a battle that we have won. I'll provide an example. I'm the union's negotiator for workers, our members who work at the Canadian Museum of History and Canadian Museum, the War Museum. These are both federal employers. Back in the day, the Canadian Museum for History used to be the Canadian Museum of Civilization. It's the same employer. They contracted out work all the time. You know, first they started with the ticketing, then they started with the cafeteria, then they contracted out some of the maintenance people, then they contracted out some of the sales people. Well, then we took them on in bargaining in 2009. There actually ended up being a strike in the end, but at the end of the day, the contract there now says no employee shall suffer job loss as a result of contracting out. And guess what? They've not contracted out a single job since. And since that time, we have bargained similar language with the Museum of Nature last year. We bargained this language, very similar language with the Canadian Museum for Human Rights and other federal employers. So the point here is we can win. The union has won this fight before. And if I would submit to everybody here that if we can win it with these other federal employers, we can win it with the Treasury Board and the separate agencies. But in all of those cases, there was never a gift from these employers. Folks had to take action. I mentioned we had a strike in one case. At the Museum of Nature, we did all kinds of mobilization work, and we're on the cusp of taking a strike vote. Every single time we've had to take action, but we can do this and we can win. And so I'm not going to speak much longer. I know you've got more things that folks want to discuss, but I do believe we have a great opportunity to achieve great things in this round of bargaining, but it's only going to happen if we mobilize and if we take action, which I think is going to be challenging because we're working in this virtual environment. But the Museum of Nature, we're working in a virtual environment for most of those employees, and we won protections against contracting out that round of bargaining last year. So I'll stop there. Thanks very much, everybody, and yeah.
Well, that was excellent, Morgan. And you weren't such a bad act yourself. You did pretty good there following Marie. But you know what? What I heard you say repeatedly is that we can make this happen, right? We can stop this contracting out. You said the same thing that everyone has said so far: mobilize, mobilize, mobilize. So, and we want to do a mobilization event or a thing tonight. So in order to get there, I have a couple of questions I want to ask our panelists. I have one for Rosie, and I believe I have one for Tufik. So Rosie, as a bargaining team member, what has your impression, be honest now, Rosie, what has your impression been on Treasury Board's willingness to move on these issues at the table?
So you want me to be truly honest?
Oh, well, I know it's tough for you, Rosie, but I think you can do it.
Banging my head against the desk is better than dealing with the employer right now on these contracting issues. They have a lot to say. Their verbiage conflicts everything that they say. Like, they're all for public service, but behind your back, they're like, how do I get rid of this person? You know, we had the bargaining demand on there, and the first thing the negotiator on the other side says, well, we don't really want to entertain this. Well, too bad, you're going to have to entertain it, because it's something we're not going to, I'm not going to say it's something we're not going to drop, but something we're going to fight very hard. and there's no substance to what they say. So you know what? Again, this is something we have to mobilize for. Everybody needs to stand behind us, especially the bargaining teams. Let us know stories, because that's the biggest thing, right? How do we have to be able to have examples how contracting is hurting the communities and a place. And I think there's a lot of good stories out there, but we need to know them. So yeah, if I get a bruise from my head from hitting my head on the table every time they go on about stuff, it's a well-earned bruise, but it's frustrating because we know we can do it. We know we can win. And like it was said, it's been done before, but they like to pit everybody against each other. So and then, like we say, they see dollar signs, they don't see the people. We are a number, and a number they can get rid of. And this is what we have to put faces to these numbers.
Thank you for that, Rosie. Marie, I hear you have to leave. So I'll just say goodbye now in case you have to leave before we end our mobilization. It was a pleasure having you on the call, and I look forward to seeing you at another event down the road. Thank you very much, sister. So I have a question for Tufik. So Tufik, if you were to tell the 227 members on the call tonight, what is it that they need to do to support their bargaining team? What would you say to them?
Merci, Colleen. Alors, ce qu'on
Thank
peut
you.
faire, c'est
Well,
vraiment.
what we could do, I was 5 years at the bargaining table to, it was an honor to bargain, and it's very important to have the support of the members. And thanks to that support, we work for hours and hours and hours nonstop to represent the members. So what can you do? What could the members do to really, firstly, when you have meetings with the employer, with the members, I have the image behind me that says I support my bargaining team. It's from the PSAC, from the bargaining section. You can have it in both official languages. I invite you to go and get that poster. It is essential to support the bargaining teams that work nonstop for your workplace conditions. And you could also ask a member of the bargaining team to meet your members virtually. Right now it's virtual. You have that right. That person could meet members at lunchtime. You could talk with the PSAC office of your component or your region, and you will be able to talk to them. It's a way of support them and to be aware of what is happening and to make sure that the members are aware of what is happening with PSAC and the Treasury Board. And what you could do also as a citizen, because before being a public servant or an employee from DCL, from a university, we're citizens. We're allowed to talk to our MPs. We're allowed to talk to them, and we're allowed to meet them, to talk to them about our issues. Our issues that are at the bargaining table. That's something else you can do, because you need to participate when the PSAC asks to participate in mobilization. That's something you can do, because when we're united all together, that is our strength. It's not by complaining and by, saying, oh, the union is doing nothing. It's not true. It's not true that the the negotiators are doing nothing at the bargaining table. We're doing serious work to represent people, and we need the support of the members. That is the strength of the union. It is the members, and thank you.
Thank you, Tufik, and thank you for everyone for your responses. So what we're going to do now, because it is 10 after 9, I'm just seeing I had a screen that says I was muted, but could you hear me? Okay, pop-up said I was muted. That was someone trying to tell me to be quiet, see? So we actually are gonna do a mobilization. And so for, the over 200 people, members on the call tonight, some of you maybe have never done a mobilization action before, and you might think it means going on strike and carrying a placard. But the Mobilization Act we're gonna do is really simple. It's really simple. In a couple of minutes, in a second or so, you're going to see a script be put up on the screen. But what we're going to do is we're going to actually make calls. It's like a robocall to a whole bunch of MPs, and there's going to be a script to tell you exactly what to do. So